So, here it is. After a year of writing the damn thing and sorting out the matchups, I finally finished my Dream Season video. Yay! So I've been a fan of Death Battle for well over a decade now, and it all pretty much began when I was scrolling through Google, searching for any versus debates that I could find, which led me to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles versus Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. That led me to clicking onto a thumbnail called the TMNT Battle Royale. I clicked on it, watched through it, found the analysis to be alright, except for Mikey, he got the shaft. I expected the resolution to be a poll, some explanation as to who the winner would be, until... Yeah, just like that, I was hooked. For those who don't know, I'm an animator, so when I saw Death Battle actually do fight animations every single episode, that got my attention and my loyalty, and I never looked back. In fact, I hope one day I could work on an episode, but that's not what we're here to talk about. I was pretty much alone when watching Death Battle. I never really had anyone to talk to about it. I mean, there was my brother, but he'd only gone into that show like years later. Until, a few years ago, I joined Nemesis Bloodreich's Discord server, where I got into many discussions with other fans about their different matchup ideas, mine, and after some time to think about it, I decided to sit down and write my own Dream Season. And that's what we're here to talk about. Okay, so when making this list, I put on some ground rules to abide by. First one was I wasn't really gonna do any popular matchup ideas. Like, not to discredit those matchups, I just think those were explained better in other videos and a lot of people know them. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Ruby vs. Maka, Galactus vs. Unicron, Simon vs. Kyle Rayner. Those have been talked about ad nauseum and I just wouldn't be able to say anything new. Second, I did my best to restrict how many characters a franchise I would actually use. I tried to restrict it to just 2 characters per franchise, but one franchise has 3. By the time I noticed, it was too late to change it, and I feel the season is balanced enough, so I'm keeping it. You'll know when we get to it. Third, I structured this list to go in what I feel was an appropriate release order. Not ranking how I feel about them, but going into how an official season is structured. Don't worry, I'll go into specifics of which matchups I really want to happen when I get to them. Fourth, all thumbnails are to be made by me, and 5. I'll be coming up with track name ideas. Not all of them are gonna be good, I'm not a music person, and it takes a long time for me to come up with a good title for anything. Just telling you now, Rixots was not always my username. Okay, I think that about covers it, so let's move right on with the Dream Season's premiere. Quick warning. Spoiler alert for any characters you see on this list, and past Death Battle episodes I'll be referencing. Got that? Cool. Let's begin. Okay, to start us off, I thought I could go for something that at least everyone has heard of once. And what better matchup could there be to kickstart this season with a bang? He-Man vs. Shazam. Ever since I watched the DB cast and listened to Cry Thunder by Dragon Force, this matchup has been on my mind a lot. I think it will be a fun episode and most likely to happen, having returning combatants, one that hadn't been in the show since season 2 and one that was in an okay episode. Not that I hated Captain Marvel vs. Shazam, I think it was an episode that needed to happen. They just didn't share that many connections and was just kind of a novelty matchup by having the same name. But I digress. I think this matchup better suits Shazam, to be honest, and as discussed on the cast, it could go either way. So I'm not a big, massive of the Universe fan or follower, and I have little to say for He-Man besides thinking he's Shazam's best matchup. Okay, so I wrote this months before I was recommended to watch Masters of the Universe, which I find to be okay. Nothing to really grab me, but I'm making small steps into the franchise. Connections are, they both have magical transformations that make them into a hunky Adonis, both are powered by magic, both are champions of eternity, and the list can go on. I know He-Man has other alternatives, like Captain Planet, but the best other matchup for Shazam is Thor, and I'm honestly okay with Thor not really coming back for the foreseeable future. And Saint Seiya, which would be awesome, but I hear Sailor Moon is his most preferred matchup, and I would like to see that. Both of these characters are known for being powerhouses to ridiculous degrees, and if Death Battle played their cards right, they could really sell the scope of power these two wield. I imagine it should be more like how Wonder Woman vs. She-Ra, but mixed with Hulk vs. Broly, you know, just to show how strong these characters are. I don't care if it's essentially flying bricks hitting each other, it's going to be awesome. With their methods of combat being different, as He-Man has the Sword of Power, and to my knowledge, some spells if the Netflix series is anything to go on. Shazam only really has his fists and the living lightning and, well, the other gods that come with his name, so that could also give him the edge, but I'm not sure. I'm really unfamiliar with what He-Man can do in the comics or any other media, so it's really up in the air of who the victor really is. But from what I hear, it could be like Black Adam vs. Apocalypse, where Shazam's powers can be absorbed and used against him, but I'm not 100% sure. Who do I think wins? I really want it to be Shazam. I mean, I just love the character, and I know way more about him than I do He-Man. Which is honestly kind of marginal compared to other comic book fans, but yeah, let's not split hairs. Moving on to track name ideas, I actually came up with this before I came up with the Dream Season, so here it is. Champions of Eternity. Gives me chills just saying it, to be honest. It really could be anything, a rap or instrumental. I would prefer it to be the latter, but it's hard to put into words of what I want from the track, but I really want the feeling that the track exemplifies the fact that two demigods have descended from the heavens and are battling on God's green earth. You know, something to get the scope of that, if that makes any sense. With that matchup over, let's move on to something a little bit more down to earth with number 2. This idea took some time for me to get used to, but once I thought hard about it, there was just no going back. Aang vs. Omi. It just made sense once you connect the dots. They're both elemental monks, both have glowy super forms, both are from shows that started to popularize the style of anime-esque, both have animal companions that fly them around the world, both were encased in ice for a damn long time, and they're both bald. I'm surprised it took me so long to really put the pieces together. Moving on to their shows, well, what can I say about Last Airbender? It's phenomenal. It's amazing. It's hard to say anything wrong with it, except Great Divide. It needs no introduction. Everybody knows what the show is. I'm not sure everyone knows Shaolin Showdown. It's not that obscure to my knowledge, but compared to Last Airbender, it's not really a series everyone talks about. So I'll just recap. It's about 4 monks that go on globetrotting adventures around the world to discover mystical artifacts called Shenggong Wu to keep them from the forces of evil. And Jack Spicer. I watched both of these shows back when I was a kid, and it's honestly hard to even put it into words. Both shows have their awesome moments, their fun moments, their dark moments, their humbling moments. I honestly just have fond memories of watching both these shows, and I always think about them every so often. I love both of these characters. Aang was just fun to watch, and Omi is a little shit. But he was an entertaining little shit. And, Omi was responsible for my childhood nickname of Cheeseball. Kids can be cruel, what can I tell you? Moving on. This matchup has a lot of animation potential, which hinges entirely on the Shenggong Wu Omi can use. We have the obvious Orb of Toonami, Gills of Hamachi, Golden Tiger Claw, the Monkey Staff, Sun-Chi Lantern, the list can go on. But I think Omi needs to stick with what he's comfortable with and used most in the show. I'm thinking, I don't know, like a 5 Wu limit. I mean, you've watched Ben 10 vs. Green Lantern, they're not gonna do all of them. Well, whatever he uses, it will definitely keep Aang on his feet, and, well, he could counter the elemental Shengon Wu like the Eye of Dashi and Star of Hanabi, and, well, the Orb of Toonami. He will have trouble with the others depending on what Omi would use. Like the Sun-Chi Lantern, which could theoretically let Omi copy his bending abilities using his own chi. I mean, we've seen him do it with the fellow monks, and while he didn't perform any elemental feats at that time, those characters couldn't do it back in Season 1, so I think it stands to reason Omi could bend through the Wu. I know I'm not really talking about Aang, but everybody knows his capabilities, so I don't really have anything new to say that hasn't already been said. I think Aang could definitely knock away some of the Shengon Wu and play at Omi's arrogance. Hell, I even think he can isolate Omi to just hand-to-hand combat. No, just between their respective skills, no weapons, I think Aang has the advantage. If Omi uses water, Aang will just bend it. But Omi may have superior martial arts skills. But at the peak of their powers, Avatar State versus whatever it is that Omi could do, I still think Aang could take it, because at his best, Omi could control massive amounts of water, but so can Aang, and that's not really going to be that good against him unless Omi could just overpower him. And checking the Versus Wiki, he definitely could. So who knows, maybe Omi could win this after all, even without the Wu. Moving on to the track name, it would be a killer mashup between the respective themes of the shows, and if I had to pick a name, I don't know, Bold of Power. You know, because they're both monks and they're bold and powerful. I swear to you, I'm really trying my best with these names. Moving on to number 3. This is the first of 3 matchups I really want Death Battle to do. I mean, seriously, I think they're my shining achievements whenever it comes to versus debates. But I don't really see threads on them, and I hope they gain traction from this video. So I know people have been trying to find a good matchup with Cyclops, and from what I've seen, I just don't really gel with them. Aizawa from My Hero Academia. He has some decent connections, and if he can shut down Scott's mutation, that will be an interesting dynamic. Cyclops having to rely on other skills, but to be honest, I just don't really see this happening. I think of it more as a good ult than being a top contender. Spartan from Wildstorm Comics is kind of the same for me, except I know nothing about this character, so I don't know how perfect he actually is for Cyclops. Danzo! I haven't read Naruto in a while, but no, I just don't see it. Leonardo has been in my back pocket, as it makes sense given their backgrounds, but Leo does not need to come back. Besides, if he were, I would like him to fight Daredevil after seeing the fan track Brandon made that is. Black Panther. Is it just because of the laser eyes? Is that it? Scott Summers is someone I know people would want on Death Battle, but finding an opponent for him is like finding a needle in a haystack. Until, one day, an idea hit me like a stroke of lightning. Speaking of lightning, Cyclops vs. Lightning Lad. So I'm not that much of a hardcore fan of X-Men and Legion of Superheroes, besides watching the TV shows back when I was younger. I'm more of a Legion guy, but besides reading the first volume of the new comic book series, I'm not a big expert on these characters, so don't expect many calcs for this one. Coming through their histories, these two have a lot in common. Both were leaders of superhero teams whose members share a lot of similarities. Both have romances with telepaths. Both have siblings that share similar powers to them. Both have sons that were scientifically altered and time traveled with them as the catalyst. Both have died and come back. Both went through some reimagining. And I just found out the Imperial Guard from X-Men were composed of ex-species of Legion members. So I think that just shows how deep the correlation between Legion and X-Men is. I was rewatching Wolverine and the X-Men and the Legion of Superheroes TV series that were both unfairly canned, and this matchup just kinda came from that. Moving on to the actual Death Battle, I know it's another Marvel vs DC matchup, but it is the best for both of these characters. We already had X-Men characters on the show, but yet to have Legion members. So let's fix that little oversight now, shall we? Let's run down the powers, because this is where it gets interesting. I already know about Scott's punch dimension lasers that can destroy sentinels and apparently small planets. He also has incredible spatial awareness that's on par with Captain America's ridiculous shield throwing feats. And he single-handedly beat members of the X-Men, which included Wolverine. Lightning Lad, however, is no slouch. He certainly has the speed and mobility advantage. He doesn't just shoot lightning, he is lightning. He can immerse himself in air and become a full lightning being. I'm not counting his prosthetic arm because, well, it's comics, so he healed from that. But if you want to count it, go right ahead. You know, originally, I used to believe Lightning Lad could match Cyclops' raw power, but it becomes clear to me that Cyclops doesn't just punch with his lasers, he can outright knock an opponent out in their next few lifetimes, and more. In fact, the more I research about Cyclops, it becomes obvious to me he takes this. Unless I'm missing a lot of Lightning Lad's feats, which I definitely am, I would say Cyclops takes this match. I mean, his brief scuffles with Storm should prepare him for whatever Lightning Lad can throw at him. Despite this, I still want this death battle to happen. I think it's a great Cyclops matchup and introduces Legion of Superheroes to death battle. Moving on to the track name. A track name I can think of is Men of Legion, taken from both of their comic book titles. X-Men has a lot to work with musically, but Legion sadly only has the one show and Smallville. But I've never really watched that show, so I don't know. This matchup has the potential to be one of the better Marvel vs. DC episodes. In fact, it's the only Marvel vs. DC matchup on this list, and I swear I didn't plan that. Moving on to the next one, to introduce it, cartoons in the early 2010s was an interesting time to watch on Cartoon Network. Before Teen Titans Go, it was going through a renaissance. From those shows were dynamic duos going through their wacky, fantastical, normal, day-to-day life. Those dynamic duos were Mordecai and Rigby vs. Finn and Jake. I grew up watching both Adventure Time and Regular Show, but never thought about these four in a death battle together until very recently. These four are some of the pioneers of Cartoon Network's Renaissance period. Both have pairs of dynamic duos that go on wacky adventures in a not-so-regular world. Also fighting their fair shares of monsters, gods, demons, and whatnot, while also navigating through relationships. One pair having a somewhat stable relationship, while the other just earns the reputation of being Cartoon Network's biggest simp. I'll admit, I was pretty apprehensive about this matchup because it seemed unfair to put these two adventurers against regular dudes who work in a park. Then I remember what show Mordecai and Rigby come from, and I got on board. From what I read, this matchup is about even, with the edge mostly given to Finn and Jake. Oh, I remember showing this to a friend of mine, and he's not the biggest Adventure Time fan, but even he agreed. Finn and Jake just kinda take this due to their own plethora of enemies and own impossible situations they've been in, compared to Mordecai and Rigby, who are, at the end of the day, salarymen, and they don't go out looking for trouble like Finn and Jake. Trouble normally just finds them, and I think that's kind of the difference between the two. Although, while Finn does have a sword and Jake is a stretchy dog, let's not count out Mordecai and Rigby just yet. I do think Mordecai and Rigby can hold their own for a bit, but I believe they should have Def Quando, and some of the other items that should be accessible to them. I'm not sure about the power because they only used it twice like most of their gimmicks, but I wouldn't complain if it showed up. But if they did have the power, they could just Thanos snap Finn and Jake out of existence, so maybe they take the win. All in all, I wouldn't really mind if the battle was done in sprite to pay homage to the series, which were paying homage to 80s classic games. But originally, I wanted this to be a hand-drawn episode, but I've come around to the sprite idea because of the reasons I just said. 8-bit video games were clearly an inspiration for these shows, so it's the best format for this death battle to be in. Track name should have the word dude in it. A regular dude adventure? Okay, I think I got it. Time for a regular adventure show. Yeah, no, something to do with the title, as I feel like you can have fun with it. Go nuts. Okay, so the next idea isn't really my idea for a death battle, it's actually my younger brother's, so it's going to be a short one. Max Steel vs. Blue Beetle. These two are two normal teenagers who bond with an alien creature that grants them power armor and the ability to change its form. Now let's address the giant beetle in the room. I know Blue Beetle has other matchups, but quite frankly, going through all of them is tedious, and I've explained why I chose this one. Another reason is that, besides watching the first couple of episodes of his reboot back in 2013, I know next to nothing about Max Steel. I know he had a movie recently that no one watched, and the ones that did found it god-awful, so I really have nothing to say about him. On the topic of Blue Beetle, I'll be stoked to get him onto Death Battle given that he's getting his own movie, so that time could arrive a lot sooner than I think. I don't really mind who he fights, but I think this matchup has some merit. Good job, little brother. Track name could be Turbo Swarm. Not all of them are gonna be winners. Okay, so we're on the second of my original ideas. This one has to happen someday, and you'll see why when I explain in a bit. Now, I know fans have been wanting a Power Rangers vs Kamen Rider matchup for a while now. I think I can guess which one. Tyler Navarro vs Kit Taylor, the Red Dino Charge Ranger vs Kamen Rider Dragon Knight. See, exactly what the fans want. Saying it right now, this is my favorite matchup of my dream season, and the one I really think can happen. Just tell me if you heard this one before. Both are young men wanting to know what happened to their fathers, that puts them on a path to find items connected to a red kaiju-sized mecha that lets them transform into red-suited superheroes. They join an elite fighting team whose members exceed the world's typical amount, and their main adversary is an alien. Both gain exclusive power-up forms, eventually find their fathers, defeated their main adversaries, but not without some help. Also, this is the big one. Their actors, Brendan Mejia and Stephen Lunsford, are besties in real life, so if that isn't some cosmic sign to do this episode, I don't know what is. I'm not sure what format this would be in, but I'm guessing sprites would work, or hell, maybe we can get live action if we're lucky. I know for a fact that if Brendan Mejia was contacted to do some stunt work for this episode, he would. Maybe Stephen Lunsford, but that might be pushing it. Honestly, I think it's likely these two would come back for one more chance to portray these characters, but I don't know. Probably won't happen because of the suits, especially Kamen Riders, but a fan can dream. Who do I think wins is really up for debate. I know Kamen Rider in Japan can match a Sentai team, which is the same level of power as a Power Rangers team, though Tyler has demonstrated he's not a ranger to take lightly. His super form should roughly be around the level of Survive mode, maybe even surpass it. I mean, Ryuki, Dragon Knight's Japanese counterpart, isn't particularly that strong compared to other riders in his universe, but we don't have that many calcs for Dragon Knight, so we have to look to Ryuki, who really buffed up after his own series if Kamen Rider Zeo is anything to go by. If I had to choose, I'd probably go with Dragon Knight if he does scale to Shinji, and I am a fan of his show more than Dino Charge, even if it is the best Neo Saban season. But who knows, maybe Tyler is more powerful than Kit, and Kit is actually weaker than Shinji, I don't know. I already have an idea for the track name that I actually grew accustomed to. Charge and Advent. It grew on me after a while. And with that said, moving on to the next one. Okay, so this matchup has been on my mind for years, but it was really more of a comparison between the two characters, not as an actual death battle, right until this year. Laxus vs Zonzas. Jeez, how many lightning eyes will I have this season? I've been wanting a Fairy Tail vs Reborn matchup since I discovered the Versus community, but my preferred opponent was Natsu vs Suna. Now that I'm older, I no longer feel strongly about that matchup. Lack of connections beyond both wielding not so average flames along with another element. This was my first matchup idea, but I think they have better opponents. Still trying to find Sunas, but with somebody I know and can get behind. Another one I thought of was Future Byakuran vs Future Rogue, but that's probably best as a DBX. So who's left? Let's see, both characters are Mob Boss inspired. Both organized a hostile takeover of the Fairy Tail Guild and Von Golo family respectively, groups that consider all members family. Both led independent teams within their respective groups, but most important of all, both have buzz cuts and can pull the coat over the shoulder look. Also, they share similar powers to the main protag and do unique techniques outside of their primary power sets. They both later redeemed themselves and teamed up with the rest of their comrades to fight bigger threats than they ever were. It took me a while to come to this matchup. I knew these two were similar, but it wasn't until recently that I began to be really hyped for this idea. Laxus is without a doubt one of the best characters in Fairy Tail, and if they were to ever do a Fairy Tail matchup again in Death Battle, I would like it to be Lucy, but Laxus would definitely be entertaining. I remember Xanthus less because he wasn't really my favorite villain. That honor belongs to Byakuran. But from what I recall and look back on, he did have a similar arc to Laxus. So if you wanted to finally introduce Reborn into Death Battle, this would be the match to do it. Their respective powers can really be fun when we get to the battle. Xanthus with his guns keeping his distance, while Laxus tries to get up close and personal with his lightning magic. Just imagine the Flames of Wrath versus Red Lightning mode. The whole thing could be dynamic if choreographed well. Who do I think wins? Not sure, because from what I remember of Reborn, it does have some heavy hitters, but Fairy Tail has grown since Reborn ended. I believe Laxus takes this cause, well, he's Laxus. And he's been calculated to be much faster and stronger, especially since 100 Years came out. But it would still be a good matchup for the characters, but I don't really like Laxus's other matchups, and I'm not really sure about Xanthus, so this is why I chose this. Let's finish this off with the track name, which would be Lightning in the Sky. A little basic, but hell, what can I do? Right, we're in the mid-season finale now, so I had to find something pretty worthy to end the first half on a high note. Luke Skywalker vs. Saber. Okay, so before you begin, yes, I know Vader vs. Saber is a very popular matchup, but I honestly just don't see it. And if Vader really had to come back, I wouldn't want him to fight Saber. I mean, Vader has other opponents, and I really want Luke to come back. I read a very long Reddit post that covered this matchup, so I'll post it in the description. But yeah, after reading it, I really want this matchup over Vader vs. Saber. And honestly, out of all the Luke matchups, this is the only one I really see happening. Green Ranger? I honestly just don't see it. Even if it would be cool to see Tommy again with the Master Morpher, I think he has other opponents. Lloyd Garmadon? Sure, I can take that as an alt, and it would work now that I think about it. Luke does have a minifigure, so you could totally do a LEGO Death Battle. Call up Forest Fire 101 and you're good to go. But I'm sticking with Saber. Anyway, I really enjoyed Luke vs. Harry for what it was, and it's one of my favorite Season 1 episodes. But my love for this character and Star Wars in general was ignited when I finally got around to watching The Mandalorian. Even when I knew it was coming, I got goosebumps when I saw that X-Wing and saw our hero cut up all those Death Troopers. It just made me fall in love with this character all over again. Honestly, I had the idea for Kyle Rayner to fight Luke, the first thumbnail I ever actually made, to be honest. But he has a more prominent matchup in Simon the Digger. Maybe after that, because the connections are surprisingly good. For Saber, I'm not really much of a Fate follower. I mean, I've watched a couple of episodes of the anime, but that's about it. I don't really know any deep stuff about Saber besides the basic stuff. Anyway, I'm choosing this as my mid-season finale because, from my understanding, both these characters are just powerhouses of cosmic proportions. So I'm expecting it to be on the level of Yoda vs. King Mickey. Luke's mastery of the Force versus Saber and her noble phantasms. Let's go! Although, after checking Saber's stats, maybe it should be Legends Luke, so it's more of a fair matchup. And you would be bringing Legends continuity into Death Battle. Again, for those of you who know Saber, maybe you guys can decide, but it's just an idea. Obviously, I vote Luke to win, but from what I read of Saber, she's no slouch. All I want is a cosmic level episode with one of my childhood heroes, even if he might not win. I think it's only appropriate that the Blender team covers this one. You know what, now that I think about it, Star Wars episodes are really in 3D these days. And the track name would be, and I have the most confidence in this title, Sabers of Light. Illuminating. Okay, the first episode back after break, and I thought I'll go into a different direction than past mid-season premiere episodes. So every season has a designated joke episode, and I thought I'll throw my hat in the ring over my pick. Originally, I didn't really choose this matchup for this kind of slot, but after looking back on their shows and how wacky and zany they were, it just made sense. Leo Dooley vs. Henry Danger. so I didn't expect to really love this matchup. But when you compare the characters, it really just clicks. They're both from action comedy shows about young sidekicks to a superpowered team before eventually getting powers themselves. Yeah, I know superpowers are different from bionics, but I don't care. At the end of the series, they grow from sidekicks to heroes as they accept new responsibilities, while their other teammates move on to new spin-offs, new teams. Also, it's Nickelodeon vs. Disney, which has been the topic of many childhood discussions I've had. So saying it outright, I want this episode to be the live-action death battle we get this season. At the end of both their shows, they're about college age, so I don't mind young-looking adults playing them. You can get away with that. Just as long as they get the comedy down. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but Death Battle hasn't really done sitcom characters, now have they? I'm expecting the action to be a step above what the shows did. No offense, but the action in the shows weren't always their strong suit, and it's an element I don't mind that they don't exactly follow the letter to. Unless it's mocking the standing around and sprouting corny one-liners. You know, on second thought, I wouldn't mind that. Okay, let's talk stats. At the end of both their series, both these powerless sidekicks were given some pretty impressive powers that let them stand shoulder to shoulder with their teammates. Henry got a nifty power of force field projection at the end of his show, and before that relied on his fancy utility belt. Besides the transforming gum, he also has a multitude of gadgets that I am in no way familiar with, so just take my word for it. Though off the top of my head, he has a tranquilizer, dark glove, mini laser, laser stick, laser remote. Damn, a lot of laser related items. Leo, near the end of season 3, got a bionic arm after he got crushed. Really loved how dark this show went up sometimes. Besides the obvious super strength it grants, it allowed him to charge up a Hadouken and has the secret ability to allow him to transfer energy, ranging from kinetic energy to even sharing his own life force. Even got a bionic leg that's a lot stronger than the arm, apparently. You know, now that I think about it, is this a really dog-eared, kid-friendly version of Winter Soldier vs. Red Hood? So in the powers department, Leo wins out, but that depends if his arm can absorb Henry's force field or hell even break through it. Henry does have an edge in experience and combat knowledge. Leo was mostly the small guy at the chair for half his series, while Henry was always in the field straight from episode 1. Though Leo has been in scraps before, even before he became bionic, it has been called out in the series how much he sucks at close combat and relies on his bionics, and before that, it was the exoskeleton. Despite this, I think Leo takes the win. Nothing to my knowledge suggests that Henry has anything that can counter Leo's bionics. His force field wasn't shown to have any drawbacks, so you could probably keep that throughout the fight until Leo got tired. Also, side note, I did not watch Danger Force, so I don't know anything about how it performs there. The fight could go either way, and I wouldn't really mind if Kid Danger edges out, to be honest. I just want to see an awesome, funny fight. Also, I know people think Kid Danger should fight Kaz from Mighty Med. I think it would be better for Kaz to be in an episode alongside Oliver, as those two are really closely knit together, and even got their powers together, and that would open up new death battle ideas involving tag team battles. And if I really had to put those two in a death battle, it would be against Max and Phoebe from Fundament. Okay, track name idea. Bionic Danger. A combination of both their theme songs, kind of like an EDM, pop rock kind of song. And with the mid-season premiere over, let's move right on to the next one. You know what, the last matchup had something to do with science. Let's do something a little bit more magical. Akko vs. Luz. Okay, so I'm just gonna address the giant frog in the room. Yes, I am aware of Luz vs. Anne, but I don't think it's the best matchup for both of these characters, but I would understand if it does get announced, if Deku vs. Aster is any indication. It's the battle of the Muggle Witches, that are the odd ones out in a magical society after being inspired by a witch in their childhood. They can both use magic through different methods outside the norm of their respective environments, and both go to school to learn their craft. They also have romantic tension with the resident Ice Queen at their school. Well, at least one of them actually did something about it. Now, it's been a while since I watched Little Witch, but it was an interesting experience to say the least. Far from the other anime I've watched, which were all just muscle-bound male warriors that scream a lot. Now I watch Little Witches that scream a lot. All serious, Little Witch is in my top 10 anime that I've watched, and is the first and only Studio Trigger animation I've watched in its entirety. You know what, funny story, I watched this series entirely on my family's TV using Netflix, and whenever I started a new episode, the screen would always shut off. Anytime I decided to sit down and watch Little Witch Academia, I would have to go through all this entire BS, and it's always the anime I've wanted to watch. Friends? Okay. How I Met Your Mother? Sure. Brooklyn Nine-Nine? Why the hell not? Whenever I wanted to watch Little Witch? Nope. Binge Devilman Crybaby? No way in hell. Saint Seiya Lost Canvas? Oh ho ho, screw you! But I digress. Owl House is a recent show from Disney, and it's in its final season. Screw you, Disney. I remember watching the announcement for it, but I honestly don't recall how I got into it, or most of Season 1 to be honest. It's kind of a blur, but I do enjoy the series. Season 2 was fantastic, and from what I've seen of Season 3, it's gearing up to be a banger. Now, Little Witch has concluded, but Owl House still has the rest of Season 3 to finish off, so Luz's arsenal is still undetermined. Now, from what we do know, however, Luz has the powers of her glyphs, which doesn't just allow her to command the elements, but with the right combinations, she can do a lot. Like, turn invisible as long as she can hold her breath, and float so she can cushion her landing. Akko, on the other hand, has learned how to do basic witch spells, like levitating objects and shooting magic beams. Her innate talents, however, lie in metamorphosis magic, allowing her to transform into whatever she can think of. Mostly animals, but she can also transform into other people. Now, her ace in the hole is the Shiny Rod, which has some pretty extremely powerful magic on its own, able to change the world among other crazy shit Akko could use it for. So as I said at the beginning... Oh wait a minute, I took that out. So it's really no surprise that I think Akko takes this. She has the power, the skill set, and the magic to snuff Luz out. Unless Luz gains a new power during the rest of Season 3, I don't really see how she can win this. Unless that new power helps her defeat the Collector, which, objectively speaking, is more powerful than anything from Little Witch Academia, probably surpassing the World Restoration magic at the end of the series. So I think this fight should be hand-drawn, but I already picked another episode to be that, and honestly I could go both ways on them, but I'll explain once I get to that matchup. But this matchup could work sprite just as long as they get the glyphs down and Akko's transformations, then all should be good. There's already a track name for this idea, but if I had to give it one, it would be Little Shining Witches. You know, cause Shiny Chariot, and Luz's name means light, and you know what, screw it. I'm moving on to the next one. Talking about Deku vs. Aster, that would be Black Clover's official debut into Death Battle, and this matchup includes a Black Clover character. Yami Tsukahiro vs. Anubis Kruger. Both are high-ranking officials in a color-coordinated worldwide organization that protects their homes that they aren't originally native to. The Clover Kingdom and the Earth branch of SPD both lead a group of misfits that aren't recognized as the best, and are viewed as less than the more popular group. Golden Knights outrank all the squads, and a squad is the best of the best. The two are master swordsmen armed with katanas and have an affinity for darkness, also are in command of a base that can transform into a giant mecha of their respective animal. Those are just really awesome mentor characters that have their own way to give valuable lessons, while they are both on different ends of the spectrum. Yami is more laid back and Kruger is more serious. Oh my god, I didn't even realize what I just did. Last note to go on is that they both have attractive women that are clearly crushing on them, but they have no knowledge of that fact. To address other matchups for these characters, I have no comment on them.
Yami vs Kenpachi is something I can't really comment on as I haven't finished Bleach, so I don't know how far the connections go, or how strong Kenpachi really is. Kruger vs Sajin, weirdly another Bleach matchup, is also okay, I guess way better than Wolf O'Donnell, but like Kenpachi, I have no idea who Sajin is, so I can't get invested in the matchup. How Yami vs Kruger came to me is when I was rewatching some old episodes of Black Clover. I saw the hideout transform, and it immediately made me think of the Delta Command Megazord. From there I connected the dots and came up with this matchup. Just think about how awesome this fight could play out. Yami is maybe doing his business in a forest, and Kruger walks in all badass-like and morphs. They both draw their swords, knowing that the other means business. With a breath, they both engage in combat almost like a samurai movie. I want the swordplay in this to be just as good as Shredder vs Silver Samurai and as dynamic as Link vs Cloud. Now they've been calced to be around the same speed, and if you ask me, the Morphing Grid has much better defense than Mana Skin. The big question is, who can deal the deadliest blow? Yami has been shown to obliterate an entire human body that was empowered by a devil, and Kruger can make his opponents explode with his own finisher. I would say Kruger because Power Rangers in general have fought enemies that have been stated to have destroyed planets and galaxies, but with Yami's Mana Zone and Ki Sensing abilities, he would make Kruger work for it. And who knows, maybe one of his many dimension-cutting spells can slice right through the Morphing Grid. Also, Black Clover has not ended at the time of me writing this, so Yami's homeland has just been introduced with new mechanics to figure out, so I'm guessing Yami's gonna get some new spell that'll give him the edge. Now I would want this to be a 3D battle, but if I'm being honest, I kinda liked the sprite work for Deku vs Aster, so I'm not entirely opposed to it, though I would still like it to be a 3D battle. Track name idea would be, I don't know, Dark Cloaked Masters. Yami's a bull and Kruger's a dog, so Bulldogs of Darkness? Yeah, food for thought. Oh yeah, hey, forgot to put this in the script. My Halloween pick for this stream season is Luz vs Akko. Because witches and stuff. And also Yami vs Kruger, not a Halloween episode, but generally to be released around the same time, because, well, darkness and stuff like that. Moving on. So, both of these characters have had multiple matchup ideas, and this may not even be the best one for both of them, but Ladybug vs Randy Cunningham is my preferred matchup for both these characters. Okay, just to comb through the matchups, I'm gonna start with Ladybug. I'll admit, I don't know much of Miraculous, besides what people told me in catching the odd episode here and there a few years ago. I hear Skitter is a good matchup, but besides a friend telling me about Worm in my first year of uni, I know less about that character than I do about Marionette. Spider-Man is a big one I see tossed around, and to be frank, I'm not 100% sold on most of his matchups, to be honest. But I have read that this is a good alternative for both characters. Jason. I don't even know why they want him to fight Marionette. No, he does not need to come back. Yaoyorozu is a neat idea, but not as engaging. I don't even know who this is. Now let's move on to Randy, because he's had some pretty popular matchups over the years. Kai from Ninjago. I think Kai has other opponents better suited for him. El Tigre, I wouldn't really be opposed to that. But I'm hearing that Ricochet from Mucha Lucha is a good opponent for Manny, so I'm gonna take that one. Jaden from Power Rangers Samurai. This one's the most popular of them all. I really just don't see it. I don't hate it, but I just don't get it. On to why I think Ladybug vs the 9th grade ninja is the best matchup for both these characters. Well, let's just see, they're both teenage superheroes who are entrusted with ancient relics that lets them transform into masked heroes. Both power sources have Asian ties and imagery with the suits that they create being a blend of black and red. They also allow them to utilize a multitude of weapons and techniques, which also includes power-up forms. Ninja Rage for Randy, and Dragon Bug to name a few for Ladybug. The Lucky Charm and Ninja Nomicon forces them to think for themselves whenever they use them, and both have enemies that are the fathers of their classmates and fight villains who can turn normal civilians into monsters which they have to defeat to cure them. And now you can see why I chose this matchup. Again, I'm not a Ladybug guy, but I chose this specific pairing because it was the best one for Randy. I used to watch his show a lot, and it means a lot to me because I was going through secondary and watching this show was just totally Bruce. I actually had an idea for a battle royale between the Secret Trio, which included Danny Phantom and Jake Long, but it wasn't meant to be. Now how the fight will play out, like many of these other episodes I've covered, I actually have no idea. I remember a lot of Randy's capabilities, but for Ladybug, nothing I can say can be taken as fact. I read that every time she uses Lucky Charm, she'll immediately de-transform, but if it creates a win condition for her, it's up to anyone's imagination of what that would be. Maybe a fishing rod for her to get Randy's mask off him, who knows. One thing I want from this fight though, is for them to get the lingo of Randy right, as well as most of his mannerisms. Even create new ones, like a Ninja Ladybug Toss, Ninja Yo-Yo Dodge, Ninja Aerial Superhero Stab. Have fun with it. I would want Randy to win, but I have no idea how strong Ladybug is. I read she's about star level, but people say that it was conditional, and I'm not that determined to figure it out. I see this as a great matchup for both characters, and from what I know of them, it would be a fun episode to watch. To get the track name over with? I got it! Ninja Miraculous 9th Grade Tales! Smoke Bomb! Okay, so it wasn't until I heard the track released by Brandon Yates that I went on to research it, and then I became on board with this idea. A-Train vs Ingenium. It's a good hero versus villain matchup, and with My Hero nearing its end and The Boys going into its 4th season, I wanted to use both franchises on this list. It really does make sense when you get right down to it. Both being speedsters, that's kind of obvious. Their codenames are engine-themed, both have older brothers they adore but unfortunately crippled by a superpowered individual due to their own prejudice. Is staying prejudice? Both sought out justice but didn't get it the way they wanted, pursued outlaws that went after their loved ones, and opposed the superhero establishment. The difference is that A-Train is in the hero business for the notoriety, while Ida wants to help others and understands what it means to be a hero. Main reason to have this episode is, while it's a speedster matchup, it's a different breed of speedster, MUs. Big thing to notice that they aren't Marvel or DC characters. Another thing is that these two have limits to their speed, so we're not gonna see anything crazy like them breaking time or causing dimensional rifts. We've seen that already, so I don't feel that bored by this matchup. If anything, I think it being more grounded will work in its favor. I mean, these guys are no Speed Force users. Now let's move on to what makes them so fast. Ida has an engine quirk, and after training he can use them for about 10 minutes instead of a burst that lasts all of 10 seconds. So we don't need to worry about Ida stalling out immediately. He also has experience fighting other superpowered beings, and can certainly take his licks in. A-Train is a soup, which means his body has been genetically conditioned to improve his physical attributes like all other soups. He can also run through a person to obliterate them and turn them into a stain on the sidewalk. He also does have a weak heart, but as of season 3 that isn't an issue, so who knows how that would affect his performance. And also, doing the TV show canon for the character, I have no idea what he's capable of in the comics. How he fares against other superpowered beings? He's pretty pathetic when it comes to combat. Sure, we see him blitz a normal opponent and take advantage of a blind spot, but in actually throwing a punch? You couldn't even beat the Deep. It was the equivalent of a slap fight your nephews have during family outings. So yeah, it's no secret that I want and think Ida does win. He has the experience and speed comparable to keep A-Train at bay. I used to think A-Train was tougher due to the body splattering thing, and how soups in general can shrug off bullets and freaking rocket launchers. But then I remember how Ida has survived his own fair share of crazy stuff, that can kill normal human beings, so the difference may not be all that drastic. We already have a track name for this one, so, gentlemen, start your engines. Yeah, I have nothing. Okay, so to be frank, out of all the matchups I have here, this one was put to fill space. I do feel strongly about it, but it's the bottom of the list compared to the others. Sakura vs. Morgiana. Okay, reason why I put this in my dream season. Well, I wanted a healthy number of female characters and wanted at least one more to finish out the season. Another one is that I wanted to introduce new franchises into Death Battle and Magi has yet to make an appearance. Third, is that out of all the Naruto matchups we've had, not one female character from that series has yet to make a debut. Which really goes to show how mishandled they were in their own series, but I digress. So when I first heard of this matchup, I was on board with it from the get-go as it did seem to be the best for both characters. Both are rosy-haired women combatants that favor a specific style. Sakura prefers punching while Morgie uses kicks, while being both comedically strong about it. Both fell in love and married the other tritagonist of their series who have an affinity for fire and use swords, and you know, I swear I thought they had more connections, but I can't find them anywhere, and if you want to post it in the comments and do my job, go right ahead. But anytime I see people requesting these characters, it's usually against each other, and it just makes sense. I've yet to finish Magi. I'm almost done with season 1 of the anime, which I put off for a long time. And I have not watched Boruto yet, so I don't know how far Sakura has come since Naruto ended. So who do I think wins? From what I read, I think Sakura takes this, but Morgie has been stated to be faster, but like many others in this, I'm okay to be surprised. It already has a track name, but if I had to give it one, Pink Power Blossom? Yeah, I have nothing. So with that out of the way, let's move on to the penultimate episode. Animated movies from my childhood, but when these movies came out, I didn't go watch them until years later. Didn't stop me from seeing them on the internet and in the cultural zeitgeist when I was growing up and the impact they had on people, especially these two characters. Jack Frost vs. Elsa was not my immediate matchup for the Ice Queen, that was Rapunzel, but I'm over that idea unless it's a Disney Princess Battle Royale. It wasn't until someone on Discord introduced me to the idea that I slapped myself in the face as it seemed that obvious. Both are white-haired cryomancers that become spiritual embodiments of a concept. Both are inspired by literary characters. Minor, but both have younger sisters. Both had to overcome their isolation and grow into the person they were always meant to be. Both movies came out in the early 2010s, which caused a lot of fan art of them alongside other animated properties. Also, these two have got to be the most popular crossover ship I've ever seen, and that was before I even watched the movies. So as I said, I had to warm up to this matchup. I was going for another opponent for Elsa, like Flame Princess or Frozone, that was pitched to me. But once I was able to see it, Jack was just the perfect fit. Okay, to just go over my history with the movies, let's begin with Frozen. I didn't watch this movie until lockdown, and that was months after the second movie had come out, and I only knew some basic things like Let It Go, which everyone and their grandmother knew about, but I never listened to the whole thing. I think I knew about the sandwiches joke, but I didn't know it came from this movie. And of course, the big one, I knew about the twist reveal about Hans, and yeah, that's not important. Once I watched the movie, it was actually kind of fun. It was great despite how overblown it was. The story had a good message, the songs were a bop to listen to, and though I don't think it needed it, Hans was a good villain. Frozen 2, however, was a movie. I was confused of what the message was, and I just could not follow along. The elemental stuff was a misstep and really should have been season-based instead of, well, Avatar. Rise of the Guardians was a movie I watched before it was taken off Netflix a few years ago, and after checking, it's back on, so have fun. Unlike Frozen, I only knew this movie was about holiday figures, and that was it. The movie itself was just wonderful, and Jack was a big part of that. I just love protagonists that don't take themselves too seriously and have a fun side. And
Despite what people say, I kinda like Chris Pine voicing Jack. He brought a charisma to the role. Moving on to power sets, it's a lot more than ice and snow, I'll tell you that. Jack can summon the wind, which he can use to fly and maneuver around. He can use his staff to channel his powers, and with it he can freeze literal nightmare soldiers. Though they are made of sand, Sandy was having trouble keeping them at bay, so it's impressive Jack could disperse them like that. His role as a guardian is to teach people how to have fun with magic snowballs that can spread that to other people. His cryomancy can range from being stated to conjuring up blizzards to creating animated ice sculptures from frosting on the windows. Elsa, on the other hand, can create ice palaces, little and big snow creatures, cast a frozen heart, and cast an eternal winter. I would also love to see Elsa riding the Nock, so you could get Elsa riding it in an open sea and Jack Frost could glide on the wind before they both eventually freeze the sea. I mean, it's no contest, Elsa has the power advantage. We've never seen Jack freeze an entire dam's worth of water about to wipe out a kingdom and cause an eternal winter to a kingdom in the summer. Not to say he can't do that, he is a winter spirit, but we've never seen him do it. But all that power is all she really has, as it's not like she can freeze Jack. I mean, he is Jack Frost. Take a good look, he's freezing personified. For Elsa, well, the cold never bothered her anyway, so maybe she would be immune to Jack's magic? But Jack has more battle experience fighting Pitch, and while Elsa could hold her own against gods and taming the spirits, she never really fought anyone like Jack, and while he hasn't fought anyone like Elsa, he has more experience fighting magical threats than her. Discounting the books, of course, which is a whole other character. What is certain, however, is speed. Jack is much faster than Elsa, seeing how he was able to travel from country to country in a short amount of time, so he can definitely get a couple of hits in. If the Nock was to be included, that wouldn't increase Elsa's chances too much, as the Nock would have to be able to catch Jack, and drowning him wouldn't really work as Jack is not mortal. And honestly, that kind of answers my own question now that I think about it. Could Elsa kill someone who's basically immortal? And in this scenario, I would have Elsa be able to see Jack, and that's what kickstarts this whole death battle. I mean, she is the fifth spirit, why can't she see him? So yeah, I think Jack's got this, and there is definitely a snowball's chance that this would be one cool episode. To go back to Aku vs. Luz, this is the episode I would want hand-drawn, but after some time sitting on it, I could see it as a sprite fight, but I would prefer it hand-drawn. I know Rise of the Guardians isn't a musical, but if this was to be a musical fight, that would be fantastic. Back when I wanted a Elsa vs. Rapunzel death battle, I wanted the track to be sung by the characters during the fight. Obviously I want Elsa to sing, but it probably wouldn't work with Jack's character. Maybe, but he never sang in the movie. Maybe during the Disney Princess matchup I'll get that track. Speaking of track names, there is a lot of ice pun possibilities with the title. Let It Snow? Nah, copyright. Cold Center? Frozen Spirits? Snow Yourself? No clue, you guys decide. Also, before I move on to the last episode, you Jelsa shippers are aware that Jack is supposed to be a boy, right? I know he has that suave Chris Pine voice, but he is over 300 and, at best, has a 14-year-old's body. While Elsa is a young adult and subtextually may not even like men? What's that? Still gonna ship them? Yeah, me too. So here it is. My grand finale. I thought long and hard about what to put here. I didn't want to just put a popular matchup here that I didn't really connect with. Then I thought back to a matchup that's been stuck with me for years, and I couldn't think of anything else to take this spot. Luffy vs. Natsu has been one of my most favorite matchup ideas since I became a fan of both series. But after some years, is it worth the hype? And before I get into that, I know these characters have other opponents. I know people want Luffy to fight Plastic Man, Captain Marvelous, Naruto, Toriko, and so on. I'm not going to take anything away from those matchups, except Marvelous. He's fighting Decade, that's what I want. Natsu has already had his time in the sun, finding another One Piece character, who just so happens to be Luffy's brother, so that has massive story potential if Death Battle really plays it right. I mean, it's basically gift wrapped. Does Natsu have other matchups? Before I grew out of it, as I mentioned before, sooner, but that just lacks connections, and just isn't really that fun anymore. Kamen Rider Wizard? Strangely, I'm into Wizard fighting Naruto. Scorpion? The dude has other matchups. An alternative that I have that warrants Natsu coming back would be Rekka Hanabishi, but if I ever do a returning combatant stream season, I'll explain it there. Okay, why Natsu vs Luffy? Well, this is a legacy matchup and it's been the most talked about I've seen in the community back when I was a kid, besides Natsu vs Ace, that is. Connections are they're both shonen protagonists that go on adventures with their friends all under the same banner. Both wear mementos of their father figures and are never seen without it. Both generally have the same personality and have older brothers that passed away to different circumstances. Also have another older brother that they were not aware of for very different reasons. Luffy thought Sabo was dead and Natsu had no idea Ignea even existed. They both possess very rare powers to their universe's standards, and at the height of their powers, drastically changed their bodies. Both had to see familial figures die pretty gruesome deaths, where they both died with a smile on their face. Both dads have something to do with dragons. Both have defeated a dragon, and that's as much as I'm willing to type. So, back when I was a kid, there was this comic that I found on DeviantArt. It was a fan manga detailing how a fight between these two would go. It's sadly unfinished to my knowledge, but it was a fun read. And then later I played a Flash game involving One Piece and Fairy Tail characters, and I would simulate how a fight between these two would go. So let's address the elephant gun in the room. One Piece is not over, so Luffy is still growing and will get even more ridiculously strong. Fairy Tail is still going on too, in its sequel, 100 Years Quest, where Natsu got some impressive buffs and feats, but let's face it, that would be over before One Piece ends. Before we go into power sets, I will say I have read by that point a decent amount of One Piece a few years back, and I've heard some whispers here and there, and I have especially heard about the crazy shit Luffy can do, but we'll get there. Beginning with the Rubber Band Man, Luffy has the powers of the Gum Gum. Okay, fine, better get this out of the way. Spoilers if you don't want One Piece spoilers. 3, 2, 1. Luffy's a god now. I don't know the full story, so I'm summarizing, but apparently the Gum Gum fruit is apparently the human fruit model Nika? Which pretty much lets Luffy become a cartoon character, playing with the laws of physics like a kid with his toys. So for those who don't know, Luffy is a rubber man. He can stretch, dope, expand, and if that isn't enough, he has Haki, an ambient energy force that lets him coat his attacks in some kind of spiritual armor, and sense when an attack is coming, and finally able to overpower someone's spirit with just his own. And if his devil fruit it wasn't enough, Haki alone makes Luffy an even more dangerous opponent. Though he does have his weaknesses like seawater, which robs him of his strength, and cutting weapons, such as swords and axes, as well as Haki, which is able to bypass his rubber body. Natsu, on the other hand, is the Fire Dragon Slayer. Later, Lightning Flame Dragon Slayer, but that's not doing anything to an opponent made of rubber. And also, now that I think about it, he's technically the Fire Dragon King? But I digress. At the end of his series, he can enter Dragon Force, the final stage of Dragon Slayer magic, which drastically increases all his physical attributes without external sources, like Aetherion and the Flames of Rebuke. Fire Dragon King mode boosts his magic to having flames of his father, which, for a one-time only use, could kill immortals. He still can use the form for other spells. He also can use thought projection, but he's not against Doctor Strange, so let's move on. As a Dragon Slayer, he has motion sickness that's standard, and is immune to fire he creates himself. In fact, he's immune to most forms of fire, which is useless against him unless it's specific fire, like Divine Flames. And also, he's weak to water too. Shocker. Now who goes home taking the win? Let's get down to it. Luffy has more going for him than Natsu sadly does. And if you can't notice by the tone in my voice, I want Natsu to win. In raw power, I believe Natsu takes this with his magic, as we've seen him destroy a lot of things and creatures. That includes a war god, which was this massive, and Natsu pales in comparison to this guy, making destroying him before 100 years quest, by the way, a feat of true destructive force. But for every giant monster Natsu took down, so has Luffy before Haki and before Kaido. With what he can do now with armament Haki, Luffy could probably match anything Natsu can throw at him. But I do believe Natsu has more destructive force than Luffy can ever accomplish. Though that does bear the question, could Luffy's Haki break through Natsu's natural defenses, and can Natsu's fire get past armament Haki? I will have to be fair and say Natsu's Dragon Slayer body and scales can be broken down if we're talking semantics. I mean, this is Haki we're talking about, but it doesn't mean it will slow him down. And can Natsu just burn and melt Luffy? Well, with Haki we've seen people shake off fists of lava and fire, so Luffy could probably do the same. But can they defend against the flames of the Fire Dragon King? Since Luffy hasn't been shown to use full body armament, I will say Fire Dragon King is powerful. I mean, we did see it burn away an entire ocean, and to embellish a little, Natsu burned away eternity. Eternity! So let that sink in. So it wouldn't be surprising that Natsu could seriously scorch Luffy. Not sure if Luffy could recover from that, but he did regenerate from a fire breath from Kaido apparently. But honestly, I'm not sure if Natsu could defend against Luffy's Haki, especially armament and sensory while we're at it. I'm taking Conqueror's Haki off the table as Natsu isn't weak-willed, unless there's something else Luffy could do with it. Natsu has been shown to get around opponents that can tell his movements, but Luffy can too. And that was before Haki. Speed I'm not even gonna try to argue on. Natsu may be faster than light, but so is Luffy. Without second gear. And to mention again, sensory Haki, which can counter Natsu's dragon senses. Okay, so going into this, I knew who I thought would win, but I was optimistic with how many people supported Natsu, but Luffy takes this. Unless I'm being pessimistic and missing some key information, but whatever Natsu can do, Luffy can do and more. But no matter the victor, this matchup is something I really want to become a real death battle someday, and I'm cautiously optimistic. Who knows, maybe Natsu will gain a new power in 100 Years Quest and can overpower Luffy. Who knows. And in the off chance he does win, I guarantee this matchup would be the most saltiest controversial episode since Green Lantern vs. Ben 10 for whatever season it appears in. The track you're hearing right now, Burning Rubber, actually belongs to Alfred Ginn, who does his own tracks for death battle matchups, so check him out. My own idea for a track name? Kings of Eternal Adventure. You know, one sets out to become the king of the pirates, one uses the power of the Fire Dragon King. Eternal Adventure, because, well, they both embody that concept, and so does their series. And with all that said, that concludes my dream season. Oh my god, this was an endeavor. This is by far the longest video I ever had to do. I want to thank all the good 2 people who made it to the end, and congratulations on making it this far. I'm not really a YouTube guy, so this was quite the task, but I'm proud of myself for actually finishing it. Who knows what I'll do next. But until then, thanks for watching. Post in the comments below what matchup you liked, which ones you didn't, and let's try to be civil about it. And finally, what matchup would you want with either characters I picked, or anything you want? With all that said, check out Detsukiwa, a project I'm working on and did a video on just before this one. All the necessary links will be in the description. I'm Rexalt, and I wish you a wonderful day.